You know, when I look at it, every time something's come along, it's sold to the producers and it's sold to the studios, and yet it falls into editorial in the post-production department to actually make it work and be able to get it back out. We are still ultimately in a storytelling business, and although I question how good the material is these days, we have the tools to do more work and better work than we ever have before, and it hasn't really changed anything. It's still the same drill and business as usual. So I think there is some doom and gloom to be expected, but I think eventually that this will create more work. And I think it's in everyone's best interest that we're all working together. So I don't think anyone is a standout here. I think everyone is working together. I know, speaking for Stephen and myself, camera and editorial have had a marriage that existed since day one. Camera and the laboratory has had a marriage that has existed since day one. And editorial has represented everyone. So I think that's what we're going to be looking at right now. I mean, if you were a producer and you're on a show and you want to cut cost, I think the first place you're going to take your workflow is into the editing room, because they certainly don't have the time and the money on the set to be doing it. So I think it's inherent that it'll be going to editorial.
One of the great things about this change in technology, and it's exciting, is that, you know, the remote technology and having other locations has allowed us as Technicolor to try to standardize our workflow for all of our locations, so we can put lower cost equipment and software in these locations, and we can support those remotely. I love hearing stories like the one I heard the other day with one of our engineers who, he was out on location in the Southwest United States, and he was an expert in database workflow, and we were having an issue overseas. We called him and he said, hey, I'm in the taxi, I'm on my way to the airport, but you know what, I have a wireless card, I have a secure VPN, let me log in and see if I can fix the issue. And within 5 minutes he fixed the issue and called us back. You couldn't do that back in days of tape machines and ranks. So it's definitely changed the way that we support, but we still want to be collaborative with our filmmakers. I think that, you know, the new digital cameras, I mean, we have a different one every day. We have a new build every day. We've experienced, you know, cameras that came out where the SDI output and the tap that was being used for True Light was in a different color space than what the files were. And we need the Josh Pines of the world that we have at Technicolor, and I'm sure the same goes for Deluxe, to be able to handle those type of issues. We feel like that on our dailies that we need to get involved at the onset of a project, and we need to plan that color pipeline, especially for those features and big features that are going to go on for a year, because we want to make sure that everybody's seeing the same thing, not only the visual effects house, but the DI house. And even if we're not doing the DI, we've done things with eFilm where we're starting a show and they're finishing it, but we get together in a collaborative, you know, support with the cinematographer when we start the show and with these other facilities, and agree on what that color pipeline is going to be and how visual effects can turn those effects back into editorial and have it match the dailies grades and not have people start pointing fingers. So again, I go back to knowledge and experience, I think, for tech, and you know, we're just changing the way that we do business, and that keeps us relevant.
And the number one thing about my particular post house is that we are educators. That's the biggest chunk of the pie in terms of migration from a service provider. That a lot of what we do, everything that we do essentially, is bordered, or at least it's anchored inside of education. From our classes, our bids, our workflows, our website, to training people, to also actually interacting with manufacturers, both software and hardware, so we can educate the people who build. I love the saying that cars are built so well because the people who engineer them drive them to work. And I entered an industry and I felt that a lot of people that manufactured things that I used didn't actually use those things. And so I want to make sure that that information is a part of that development. So education is number one. If sometimes once when people ask, what do you think Light Iron will be doing in 10 years? And I agree with Larry saying that the next 5 years are a little bit easier to predict, but the real meat of the issue is what happens 7, 10 to 10 years afterwards. And I think our answer is our post house is becoming an R&D infrastructure. It's becoming an infrastructure that is built on advisory and supervisory support of people. In other words, we're taking and keeping the level of post, but we understand that we're going to have to give up some of the house. Because no one's actually arguing. I would never argue that the information that your customers need is more pertinent today than ever before. They absolutely need post-production. That's not going away. That can't go away. It only goes away if we don't shoot anymore, I suppose. So if we stop shooting, then yeah, then we're in trouble. But as long as there's shooting, as long as there's acquisition, there is post. It has to be that way. But where does a post house start to monetize some of that? And I think a lot of it for us is in advisory, supervisory, and strategic roles. And that's the shift in terms of what that post support looks like. I think that in 2017, clients are going to need the exact same services that they need today, but they're not going to be delivered in the same package that many of you are used to delivering that information to.
I can't say enough about having a software team in-house that helps you develop your tool set. For us, you know, if I have a new file format, the other day I have someone, XA10. Okay, we're shooting the XA10. Very common camera for, you know, handycam stuff. In fact, some of the kids in my neighborhood who are riding skateboards were shooting with an XA10 just last week. But we have a movie that's shooting XA10, and you know, I go to my software engineers. I say, "Hey, how do we support this camera?" And they go back in their little lab, and they have keyboards that are, you know, 5 times too big, and they write up support. So it's as a company, we're thinking ahead. We've got some really great tools that we're pushing forward and that we're supporting that are, you know, going to be the next generation of these tool sets. We've already kind of done the next lab thing. We're actually moving on now to the next generation of things. So it's been great for PhotoChem.
Collaborative workflow, I mean, is something that we've done for the history of this industry, you know, and what we're learning now is that it's not that Kodak has tech standards and they send it to the laboratories, and laboratories have calibration and everything, and we know what projection is supposed to be, so it seems to be a calibrated system. Now it's different. Every time, you know, we look at something, whether it's on this or on that or on a huge IMAX screen digitally, there hasn't been proper standards of calibration. This is important because for me to talk cinematographically to the editing room, to the way wherever the image is going to be put up on a screen and how it's going to be done, if we don't have that kind of calibration from the beginning, we don't have a conversation. We're talking, you know, across from each other as opposed to each other. And
talking about the room design, you need a certain footprint for your room in which you're going to do your movie. You cannot do it in the garage. You can make a movie which goes into the internet perhaps in a garage, but a colorist will feel the color from the big screen. You need a big theater to really feel the color and get the direction, and you as a DP feel the color different as well, sitting next to the colorist. So now the colorist puts on 15 power windows and sharpens and enhanced and God knows what, and then tell him, so now float an Atmos audio object from the left side of the room to the back side of the room. The colorist will say, WTF then. Yeah. It is another room. I mean, we like to work in rooms with a flat screen, not a perfed screen, so we don't have the audio capabilities in a professional DI room. So the next room is the audio room, so I guess we need a special professional edit bay, the audio bay, the color timing room, so this is all needed. Yeah? And I agree with Stephen that the closed loop is the greatest thing to have. I heard it was in 2005 we worked with Dean Simler on Apocalypto. He had our calibrated monitor there and said, hey, you know what, I stopped watching dailies. I see my image here. I trust you that what goes to editorial and to the other divisions will be the same what I saw live screening on the picture. There I thought, hey, perhaps we don't have dailies at all in the future, but we need to deliver to the client what the client is asking for. But being professional and educated, there's enough work out there for all of us. Yeah.
Post houses have been involved with the creation of technology. And the reason we can sit here today and even discuss all this is because the engineers, the talent,
and the people at these technical institutions, these post houses, got together and talked about what needs to be done in order for things to progress. Now, Bill Feichner's name was mentioned. I would like to repeat it again. This is a man who helped institutionalize color science in this town. So did Josh Pines.
Doug Jacqua.
Pardon?
Doug Jacqua.
Doug Jacqua. These people, they worked at facilities that were dedicated to the art and science of post-production technology. And so, you know, when you ask about 24P, where did that come from? Hey, you want to talk about Da Vinci? Where did that come from? It came from a post house. You know, and tell me who the sucker is that's going to put a complete color correction system on set for the DP to be able to look at and have the joy of being able to have his windows and everything else. It's a post house sucker that's going to do that. You're not going to find an editor who's going to provide that technology, provide the technicians, provide the background, provide the entire infrastructure necessary to support it from end to end. Who has the vested interest in making sure that the post goes well? The studio and the post house. Certainly, I can't argue that the editor doesn't have an influence in that. He absolutely does. But when you talk about the efficiency of post, who benefits? The people who are going to make the money. That's who benefits. It's the studio and the people who are finishing. One last thing. Again, with due respect, 4K television's on the horizon. This stuff called HD, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing compared to what's on the horizon. 4K television is coming, and it's maybe 8 to 10 years away at most. Sony has already introduced 4K televisions, if you're not aware of it. That's going to be heavy-duty files. This is about the transportation of files, the management of files, doing assemblies. Yes, Danny, you're right. Anybody can do an assembly now if you have an Avid or a Final Cut Pro system. However, try doing it with 4K files, moving that stuff around, storing it, administrating it properly. That takes an institution, and that's my point.